Welcome. My name is Robin Peterson.
My name is Debbie Fleisch.
And our purpose and goal for the clinic is to help you understand the rules of swimming and come away with it with a better understanding on how to officiate the swim meets and provide the best possible meet for our swimmers. We're going to go ahead and start with our rule book, and if you turn to page 8, we're going to start with our definitions. And you can follow along in your book. We're going to skip around a little bit because some of the parts aren't pertinent to your information that you need. We have a picture of the BYU pool up here that is no longer. You notice the pool is in a rectangular shape. Not all of our pools in Utah are rectangular. Some of them you can only walk part of the side and all of the other side. So when you officiate a meet, you have to have it be fair and equitable all the way around. If you can only walk part way on the left side of the pool, you can only walk part way on the right side of the pool. You notice that there will be a timing device on every lane. It'll be a touchpad and it needs to be centered in the middle of the lane. There will also be backup watches. At least one backup watch needs to be per lane also. A race officially begins when the referee blows the long whistle. That's when it officially begins. It officially ends when the last competitor touches the end wall of the prescribed distance. Now, in a championship meet, it is a culmination of a meet. So you can have a 2-day meet and it just counts as 1 day. Okay, you can also run not a championship meet in a championship manner now. A competitor can scratch with a declared false start, and they can scratch from a specific event, and that does not penalize them. It just takes them out of that meet. Okay, page 10. Now, they've been really specific. They do not want any deck changing going on. Deck changing means when you are wearing one suit, you change out of that suit on deck, whether it's behind a towel, behind a parka. You cannot deck change. It is a big no-no. You need to go into the locker rooms or wherever they have designated the area to change. That's where you have to go. There's certain rules that cannot be changed or said, okay, it's okay by mutual consent, we're not going to do this. That's the water depth, the height of the blocks. There has to be a backstroke flag there. There has to be some kind of recall device. Now, in our starter portion, you'll see that our starter has a recall device. You can use that, or they string a rope across the pool, and it has to be after the backstroke flags. But there has to be some kind of recall device. Those things cannot be waived by prior mutual consent. Now we have, did it go back up? We have wave pools in Utah. Some of the wave pools, they have to be overflowing into the gutter for them to be legal to run a meet. I know I've been to a wave pool before where it was not running into the gutter, and we had to wait several hours for that pool to fill up enough that the water ran into the gutter for it to be legal. If it's not running into the gutter, you cannot hold a swimming event there. Okay, on page 13, it talks about water temperature and the water level there. It gives suggestions, but it said anything time the rule book says shall, that means it's mandatory. It has to overflow into the gutter, okay? All the necessary equipment to run a swim meet has to be provided by the host team. Now I was going to get another picture here. If you notice on these backstroke blocks here, they have a wedge. Some of our pools have that wedge and some do not. When the wedge is there, the swimmer can adjust the wedge But in the relay events, they may not, swimmer 2 through 4 may not go off the top of the wedge. At least one foot must be in contact with the starting platform. Okay? We talked about the recall device. Let's go back to the backstroke flags. There's a backstroke flags on either end. They have to be ran 15 feet from the start end and 15 feet from the turn end. There must be 3 pennies of alternating colors hanging over each lane. Now sometimes our backstroke flags get pretty worn out. What do you do when you're in lane 1 or lane 8 and you don't have backstroke flags or enough alternating in those lanes? We've actually had to put colored towels so that the backstroker has some visual when they're coming in for their turn. But there must be at least 3 of alternating colors over the lane. We also have lap counters when we come to the 500. Now the 500, they have changed it. You now can count in ascending or descending order. Your final lap will be orange or red. That signals that that's the final length for the 500. But now they can count up or down, whichever way that the swimmer prefers. It'll be a little more difficult for us as officials to keep track of lanes, but that's the way they've done it in the book now. We talked about the timing and the touch pads. Now here's a question that comes up. Quite often we're asked, is it legal to put a towel over our starting blocks? Is it legal? Yes, it is legal. As long as the facility allows you to put a towel over the starting block, that is legal. If the facility says no, then it is not. It must not interfere with the timing system though, so it cannot hang down onto the timing pad. Some kids just feel a lot more secure if they have a towel laid over there, gives them a better grip, makes them feel better. It's totally fine. Okay. Now let's move on to Rule 3, Team Personnel. It's page 17. In a championship meet, a maximum of 4 entries in an individual event and 1 team relay. So that's your teams. I want to notate here in Article 2, in other meets, a team shall be permitted a maximum of, and then it gives you several examples. 2 entries per individual in a pool with 5 lanes. If you look down on C, I'll read, by prior mutual consent, a pool with 8 lanes or more, each team shall be permitted as many additional entries as may be equally provided by both teams. A letter was sent out by UHSAA to the coaches for the UHSAA 2017-18 year. Article 9 is meets. Number D says, host school may allow unlimited entries or run extra heats of certain events, giving more swimmers the opportunity to compete. So if you choose to run more events, it is allowed. It does not have to be done equally by each team. Okay? Also, unlimited team entries may be provided in an individual or in a invitational, triangular, and non-varsity meets. However, the individual entry rule must be followed. Now, individually, a competitor is permitted to enter a maximum of 4 events, which of only 2 can be personal. They can only be 2 individual events for themselves. They may swim 2 events, 2 relays. They may swim 3 relays and 1 event, but that's how it needs to be broken up, okay? And remember, prelims and finals counts as 1 event. And exhibition competitors are also permitted, but it also counts as one of their entries. It does not score points, but it does allow them to use their time. But they can be disqualified also. In all meets, All competitors, once officially entered in, unless they scratch, shall compete in all races, heats, and rounds of the competition. Now, in case of injury or sickness, if a competitor is sick or injured, they may go to the referee and say, "I'm sick, I cannot compete in my 50 freestyle." Or their coach can come and say, "I have a swimmer that's sick." We can do a declared false start, and it does not penalize them. If they get better later on in the meet, they can go to the referee and be reinstated into the event if they do choose so. That's all on page 18. Now, once you are entered into a meet, you must compete in it and complete everything that you've been entered into. In a non-championship meet, a competitor who has officially been entered into an event but does not compete shall just be disqualified from that event only. In a championship meet, it is not that way. If you do not compete, you do not show up, you are out of the whole meet. So it's quite severe. We talked about the declared false start at the bottom of page 18. Now, on our relay teams, relay names can be turned in. In Utah, they do not have to be turned in. The first person of the relay needs to be stated if they want to use their time. And it has to be declared before the end of that relay race, okay, for that time to count. Also, you have 8 names that you can turn in as a coach. 8 names for a relay. They don't count as individual event entered until those people actually swim in that relay. Then it counts. If you happen to have somebody that comes up sick, you can take from those 8 names somebody else that does not have their entries already taken, and then you can use that person, okay? In the penalties portion, it talks about not competing and how you're disqualified. At the bottom of page 18, it talks about your leadoff swimmer turning in the name so that they can use their time. In Article 6, it talks about bleeding. Now, we work at pools. Pools there's many, many sharp objects. We have bleeding happen all the time. The book specifically goes over when blood is detected, somebody has an open wound, and there is blood on the suit or the area around, they should be directed to leave the area, change their suit, make it legal before returning to competition. Now, a lot of times it happens when a race is going on. If this occurs prior to the race, of course, you have them change, you clean up the area, you delay it until proper treatment. But once the relay race has began, and blood is detected in the starting area or on a competitor, the race is stopped, and you take care of it, and then you rerun the race. Now, the only time this does not happen is when it's the 4th swimmer in the water. If it's the 4th swimmer in the water, you let them finish, and then you would take care of the bleeding, okay? Now, next is Article 7. It talks about concussion. The rule of thumb with concussion is when in doubt, sit them out. If somebody has banged their heads, and of course we are on a slippery surface, on tile, concrete, if somebody manifests symptoms of a concussion, sit them out. Their life is far worth more than running a race, okay? In the back of our rule book, it talks about concussions. And also the National Federation does have a little video on concussion too that you can go on site and learn more about it. Never let them come back and swim events until they have been declared okay by a healthcare professional. We are not healthcare professionals, and I do not want to take that upon myself. Somebody's life is far more important. Page 23. we talk about in a championship declaring a false start, okay? Once a declared false start has been made in a championship meet, they're going to move other swimmers back up into your spot. But the rule book does give leniency that if you get feeling better before a time that's been said by the official or the referee, okay, by this time in the meet, if you haven't come back to me, we've replaced you. If you're before that time, you actually can be put back into the meet. But if you've passed that time of cutoff, whoever the referee has replaced you with, the alternating swimmers, they get to run the race. And that on page 23 talks all about that. Now, section 3, on page 24, we talk about our uniforms. The suits need to be air and water permeable. They may have no fasteners except for a tie for the boys' jammer or Speedo. Other than that, there may be no fasteners. Air and water permeable. No, we are not scientists, but you can tell if a suit is made of the right kind of fabric. I had a girl show up from another country. She had neoprene in the upper part of her suit. You could tell that it was not legal. Also, we have a FINA stamp on the back of our suits that says FINA has said that this suit is legal for competing into. But not all of our suits are going to have that FINA stamp on them. So use your best judgment. Just know they cannot have any fasteners. These girls love the suits that tie in the back. I'm sorry, but they're not legal to compete in. Okay, they're really cute, but they can't wear them. So they have to wear their team suit and their team cap. Now, a lot of our kids swim club. They have college caps. They have all these fun caps. They cannot wear that in competition. It has to be their high school team cap. If they don't have one, they may turn it inside out. It's always plain on the other side and wear it that way. We always want to be proactive on the deck as officials. If we walk around and we see somebody who is not legally attired, speak up and let them know, because we don't want them to show up at the block and have to disqualify them for something we could help them out with, okay? So if you see kids with their club caps on, tell them they've got to get their high school cap on or turn it inside out so that they're legal. We don't want to disqualify them. There can be no advertising on their caps, okay? They have to have a single manufacturer logo on it, say Speedo, TYR. It only can be there one time, okay? And it cannot be more than 2 1/4 by 2 1/4 inches. An American flag can also be on their cap or suit, and it has to measure 2 inches by 3 inches. They can have 4 inches square of non-permeable on their suit. Say it's their team is stamped on there after construction of the suit. It cannot be bigger than 4 square inches of non-permeable material. Now, say that your team wants to wear a commemorative patch. Say they've won state for 3 years in a row. And so they want to have their logo 3 times, state winners, on their cap. They can do that. That is legal. If it's a commemorative for something like they want to commemorate somebody's mother who has breast cancer, they must go to the state association and get written permission to be able to do something like that. The only things that can be on the cap, they can have their name, and it can't be a nickname. If their name is Elizabeth, they could have Liz or Beth, but they can't do a nickname. They can have their school mascot, they can have their school name or a school nickname, but that's all that can be on their cap, okay? Now there are penalties. Like I said, be proactive as an official. If you walk around and you see a girl that has 2 sets of straps Obviously, she's got 2 swimming suits on. Okay, talk to her or talk to her coach and say, you know, you can only compete in 1 swimming suit. Now, can a swimmer wear 2 caps? Absolutely. But they need to be cautioned that either both caps need to be legal, or if their underneath cap is not legal, you better pray that top cap doesn't come off, because it might, okay? So the wearing of 2 caps is legal. It's just nice if they're both, or 2 caps can be worn if they both need to be legal though, in case that top cap comes off, which has happened before. And it's pretty sad to have to disqualify somebody because they're wearing their club cap underneath their high school cap, okay? So if it's discovered somebody is illegally attired, if we go to penalties on Article 25, when an official discovers a competitor wearing illegal attire, as described in Article 1 and 2, the official shall, when it's prior to the start of the race, notify the competitor they need to make legal their swimming suit before they can compete. If they cannot comply with this without delaying the meet, then they'll have to be disqualified, and they cannot swim until they make their attire legal. When it's observed after the race begins or at the finish of a race, they have to be disqualified and told that they cannot compete anymore until they're made legal again. The bottom of page 25 talks about the swimming suits, what we just went over about no fasteners, have to be air and water permeable. The top of page 26 talks about wearing 2 suits, and the penalty for that is the same. A competitor shall not wear or use any device or foreign substance to aid in buoyancy or in compression, such as not wearing 2 suits. Okay? They are allowed to put a foreign substance on their body as long as it's not excessive, and the referee uses their discretion for this. Adhesive are not allowed, and we don't do diving in Utah. There is a taping rule though. A tape may be used for a swimmer that is being documented and treated for a medical condition. The referee, though, must be presented with a letter signed by the appropriate healthcare professional before they're permitted to compete. So at the beginning of a meet, the referee or the coach would bring this to the referee and say, I have Sally who has been treated for a shoulder problem. And the referee will notate, she'll look at the tape, she'll say, notate it on their paper, oh, she has black tape on her right shoulder, and she has a letter of recommendation. So the referee can then in turn, when they have their meeting with their officials, say, we have a swimmer from so-and-so who has black tape on their right shoulder, so that they're aware when they see this that it is okay. That is the only time it's allowed, is with that letter. Now we also have a situation, what happens when you're at the pool and something happens? The rule book has an example of this. A swimmer jams their finger into the gutter at the finish during warm-up. They've jammed it really hard. Now, you don't have a healthcare professional on deck, you have your coach. The coach tapes the fingers together just for stability. Is this allowed? Yes, it is allowed, because at that point, your coach is the only healthcare provider there. There's clearly an injury, you would allow that. Now, if somebody showed up and they've got taping up and down their legs and they have no letter that they're being treated for something, the referee would tell them, you need to remove your tape before you can participate, because if you participate without a letter, you will be disqualified. Okay? The same thing goes for compression. Sometimes we see the kids come with a compression sleeve on their knee. That is not allowed unless they, no, that's just plain not allowed, not even with a letter of recommendation, okay? Our swimmers that have medical alerts, They used to say they had to be taped to the body. They do not have to be taped to the body anymore. We want whoever to come help them to be able to read that medical alert and know what needs to be treated, okay? We do not have a jewelry rule anymore in high school, so the kids can wear jewelry if they choose. Okay, page 27, we already talked about commemorative patches. We talked about 2 caps on page 8. Now, this has kind of been a really touchy subject in swimming, but swimmers may only wear one suit. They may not wear a sports bra or a brief underneath. If there's a particular circumstance, a swimmer has to go to the state association with their problem and get a letter of approval to be able to wear such, okay? Clear as mud on page 29, okay? Okay, we talked about lap counters briefly. On page 31, it talks about the visual lap counter, and 1 visual lap counter has to be provided for everybody swimming the 500. If a team is lacking in enough lap counters, the host team will forfeit their swimmers. They can still swim, but their lap counter has to go to the visiting team, okay? And remember, they can count up or down now. There is no electronic devices on deck. A swimmer may not wear a pace watch, anything in their ear that beeps to let them know their pace. None of this is legal. I think it's kind of crazy if somebody tried to swim a race with a watch on, trying to pace themselves. They should be concentrating on swimming fast, not what their watch is saying. Okay? A great big change in our rule book this year is on conduct. They have changed the whole section 6 on page 33 on conduct. They have broken it out into unsporting conduct and unacceptable conduct. Unsporting conduct is the worst of worst, and you're kicked out. You're done. So, you need to make sure your athletes understand the unsporting and the unacceptable conduct. It's all in gray because it's all new. No team, competitor, or personnel shall display unsporting conduct. This includes any act that the referee deems unsporting, including, but not limited to, the following: making insulting or derogatory remarks, gestures, or actions, including taunting. Taunting is a big no. That doesn't mean you're good rivalry, you're talking back and forth amongst, other teams. That's good, healthy. This is taunting, derogatory remarks made to a swimmer. We don't accept that, okay? Trying to influence or show disgust with an official's decision. Interfering with the meet's officials and the performance of their duties. Deck changing before, during, or after a swim meet. Big no-no. The use of an electrical device to transmit information to the competitor during the race or the dive. The use of alcohol or tobacco or e-cigarettes or anything similar to that, beginning with the arrival at the venue, during competition, and departure from the competition place. The last one, biggie, is no on-site shaving. Not in the locker room, not in the spare bathroom, no shaving. They do that at home, not on deck. There's a note in here from the National Federation which reads, the National Federation disapproves of any form of taunting which is intended to or designed to embarrass, ridicule, or demean others under any circumstance. We do not want it on our pool decks. Our swimmers are far better than that. The penalty for any of these unsporting conducts is pretty severe. Disqualification from further participation in that swim meet, including all the events in which the competitor has previously qualified for. For excessive unsporting conduct, team personnel, as defined in 1-4-2, may be ejected from the competition area. Now, Article 2 reads, this is unacceptable conduct. It includes any act the referee deems unacceptable, including but not limited to the following: willful failure to follow the directions of the meet official, using profanity, whether or not it's directed at someone, or any action which could be discredited to an individual or his or her school, failing to swim in your assigned lane throughout the race, or interfering with another swimmer in a lane. Contacting the bottom of the pool for the purpose of gaining an advantage and not leaving the pool promptly when requested to do so by the referee. The penalty for this will be, though they are disqualified from that event or their next event, which the swimmer is entered, whichever is appropriate. If a spectator becomes unruly, they can be also removed from the venue. No team personnel can enter the swimming pool, the swimming area, without the referee's approval. Now, we have instances where kids accidentally fall in. So the referee is going to have to use discretion on certain circumstances that happen. But there are, on page 34, the penalties for this. Let's move to page 35. This is in our situations and rulings. It's 3.6.2 situation C. During a backstroke turn, the swimmer in lane 2 executes a legal turn, but while underwater enters into lane 3 without interfering with the swimmer in lane 3. She resurfaces in lane 2 and completes the event in that lane. The swimmer is disqualified from that event. That is a correct procedure because a swimmer must start and swim in his or her assigned lane throughout the whole heat. If we go down to 3.6.2, I want to point this out because the National Federation does not want to be so severe in their penalty. During the 500 freestyle, a competitor stands on the bottom of the pool for a brief rest, then pushes off the bottom of the pool and continues to swim. They deem it legal. This is why. The National Federation of Swimming and Diving Rules Committee has not interpreted Rule 3-6-2D so rigidly that it penalizes swimmers who contact the bottom of the pool for the purpose of resting, regardless in the manner in which they leave the contact with the bottom of the pool after they rest. However, walking on the bottom of the pool or bouncing down the race course would be illegal. Additionally, it would be illegal to do this standing on the bottom of the pool in backstroke, breaststroke, or in butterfly because it violates the provision of the body position. So sometimes the kids might want to rest at the far end of the pool, maybe after they've touched and turned. That contacting at the bottom of the pool, remember, it has to be for an advantage, okay? On page 37, it goes in about people falling in the water and what the procedure should be there. While the 500 freestyle is being contested at the post-season championship meet, the counter in for the swimmer in lane 1 in their excitement, accidentally falls into the water as his teammate makes a surge for the final 50 yards of the race. At the conclusion of the race, the referee disqualifies A, the swimmer in lane 1, B, another swimmer from their team who is swimming in lane 4, C, 2 other swimmers from their team who swam in an earlier heat. The ruling is A and B, the swimmer in lane 1 and another swimmer from the team who is swimming in lane 4 are disqualified. So if somebody falls in the water during an event, everybody in that team gets disqualified in that event. It's a referee discretion issue there. You need to be able to understand what went on when that person fell in. That's why being a referee is really, it's a tough job, because you've got to know everything. Okay, that takes us up to officials and their duties, and we'll go on with the next segment.
We are now going to go over the officials and their duties. Depending on what type of meet you are, there may be different sets of officials on the deck. In championship meets, the competition shall be administered by a referee, a starter, stroke inspectors, turn judges, takeoff and finish judges, timers, a scorer, a recorder, and an announcer. The meet committee and a meet director assume the responsibility for all aspects of the meet management. Non-championship meets, which could be our invitationals, our dual meets, shall be administered by the number of officials sufficient to properly conduct the meet. You will notice in here that the minimum required is only 2 officials. We do not recommend that you try and run a meet with only 2 officials. It would be very, very difficult, but if that's all you have, you can do it and be legal. The meet referee is the official that is in charge of the entire meet. They are in charge of making sure that the meet is set up properly, that everything is in place before the meet starts. They are also have retained the clerical authority, so they need to understand the high-tech and the timing equipment so that they can help the officials that are running that portion should the need arise. State associations may intercede in the event of unusual incidences before, during, and after the referee's jurisdiction has ended, or in the event that a contest is terminated prior to the conclusion. But a referee's decision at a meet is usually the final decision. Your referee is your head official. The referee is the only person on the deck that wears a whistle. So other officials do not wear the whistle. You are responsible, if you are the referee, for making all the decisions on things that are not specifically covered by the rules. So you need to think through situations, maybe refer to situations in the rule book to help you in your decision making. You can set aside the application of a rule during a meet or order a race re-swum if there's obvious unfairness. So if you have a major thing happen during the meet, during a race, something happens, you can order the race to be re-swum at any time for a reason that you deem to be good. Referees' decisions are final. The note in non-championship meets, when one official assumes the responsibility of the referee and starter, which is only legal in non-championship meets, you are then referred to as the referee/starter. Electronic devices are not to be viewed by the referee for verifying decisions. So if you have somebody run up to you with an iPad that just filmed everybody, or a GoPro camera, you cannot look at it. You cannot use it in your decision making. It's also required that our officials dress uniformly, as was talked about at the very beginning. So we wear khaki pants, navy blue shirts. Please no jeans, no attire that does not designate you as an official. Officials also cannot use alcohol or any form of tobacco from the arrival at the meet until you leave. Even e-cigarettes, nothing allowed within the pools. All the situations and rulings go through different things that can come up during meets. Situation 4.1.5, situation B, during a 100-yard backstroke event in a dual meet. B, the championship prelims of a 100-yard backstroke event, a swimmer does a flip turn at the halfway mark. As the swimmer touches the timing pad during the turn, it becomes dislodged, abruptly moves upward, and then proceeds to sink to the bottom of the pool. The pad movement clearly and negatively affects the turn and the race of the backstroker in that lane. In the referee orders, in A, the referee orders the race to be re-swum. In B, the meet committee determines that the swimmer may re-swim the race. The ruling is correct procedure. In a dual meet, the referee is responsible for making decisions on matters not specifically covered by the rules. In a championship meet, the meet referee could make the decision, or the situation could be referred to the meet committee. So in situations like this, the referee needs to be aware of what went on and make the appropriate decision to benefit the swimmers. Okay, on page 39, this is what the referee does. The referee's authority begins as soon as you are available on deck. The referee must arrive at the pool at least 30 minutes before the beginning of the meet. You must see that all equipment is necessary for the proper conduct of the meet is in proper place and condition. So you go through, you check your starting blocks, you make sure the backstroke flags are in the right place, make sure the 15-meter marks are correct. That is all the job of the referee, to survey the entire pool, make sure everything's there that needs to be there. You have to check the markings of the pool. You assign your duties to your officials. So that's a meeting that, as an official, you'll go to a little meeting with your referee before the meet starts so that everybody knows their jurisdiction depending on the design of the pool and how many officials are there. Before non-championship meets, if necessary, you may have a pre-meet conference with the starter, the captain, and the coach. This is a very good idea, to have the meeting with the captain and the coach from each team to make sure everybody has checked their swimmers to be attired legally. During the meet, the responsibility of the referee are to check that each swimmer takes the proper lane, call them to step on the starting box or pool deck, and signal the starter that the starting commands may begin. This is what the referee has their whistle for. So, Robin, do you have your whistle? So the referee first blows short whistles. This designates to the swimmers, get ready, get your sweats off, put your cap and goggles on. Your race is about to begin. Then the referee blows one long whistle. The swimmers then either step up on the block or step into the water. This is the official beginning of the race. So once that swimmer has stepped up for the long block, the race has actually begun. You also put your hand out to the starter as soon as you have stepped the swimmers up. So if you are the starter, the referee's hand goes out. At that point, the starter takes over. Your job as referee is to get the swimmers on the block. The starter's job is to get them into the water. You can also carry a sounding device for recall, but you cannot use a starting pistol. So you could have an air horn or something like that if you need to have something other than the rope or the starting system, which we usually use for a recall if we do a recall. Okay, referees also determine all disqualifications. So you watch your swimmers, hands up, disqualification, everything runs through the referee. So if you are a stroke and turn judge, you have a disqualification, you have to get your disqualification to your referee. If you are a turn judge, your hand must go up for the disqualification to be legal. The referee also is the person that's responsible to notify the competitor's coach of the violations. You can sometimes tell the coaches, I will come to you at the break, I will give you the disqualifications, because it's not always possible for you to run to a coach. So that's the other thing, that you have a good meeting with the coaches to let them know how the meet is going to be run. You also confirm that no athlete violates the individual entry limitation. You just go over that with the high-tech person at the beginning of the meet. You resolve any disagreement in a race in a timely manner. So if there's a protest, the referee deals with the protest. The protest can only come from a coach, not a parent, not a swimmer. The referee is the one that makes sure the meet progresses without delay. So the timing of the meet is all through the referee. The referee has to keep everything running smoothly. You have to wear a lot of hats. Your eyes have to be on your meet, on your officials, and making sure that everything is being run fairly and it keeps going. You can signal by one hand over the head on discovering any swimming violation, so the referee can call anything they see. So stroke and turn judges, if they are distracted, if they miss something, but the referee sees it, they can call it. You can declare a dual meet forfeit for any conditions described in 7.2.3 if they are met. You can also be the one that determines if there's need for backup times. If you see a touchpad that got moved over, or the timing system, people go, the touchpad didn't fire. You are the one that can say, let's go to backup times. What are your watch times? What are your button times? You can stop or suspend competition or suspend, terminate a contest whenever the elements require. So that would be if you're at an outdoor meet and there's lightning or any other unsafe weather going on, you are the one that would suspend it. Within 1 hour after the meet, referee checks the scores tabulations, you record the time the meet was completed, and sign the score sheet. The meets have 48 hours after that to correct any clerical issues. That does not mean that somebody can say, oh, I forgot to turn in a DQ, and they want to go back and DQ a swimmer after the meet's completed. That cannot happen. Okay. The starter on page 42. The starter is a very difficult job with a very short description. The starter follows the procedures in 8.1.1 and 8.1.2. They are the person that basically gets the swimmers into the water fairly. They shall sound a warning device for the lead swimmer during the 500-yard free. If you have bells, use the bells. If you don't, use the beep, 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 beep on the starting system. The sounding device shall not be a pistol or a closed-barreled starter's pistol. So if you have a bell, it's the best thing to use as a starter. Stroke inspectors. So a lot of times you'll hear us refer to you as stroke and turn, because we don't always have enough people to be a stroke inspector. The stroke inspector is the person that walks the side of the pool. So if we have enough officials and we have a good rectangular pool, we would have turn inspectors on the end and stroke inspectors that walk the sides. We like to have stroke inspectors because it makes the job of watching everyone easier, but we don't always have that benefit to us. Stroke inspectors from the start of the race examine the swimming strokes from end wall to end wall of the competitors assigned to their lanes in the half of the pool nearest the side for which they are observing. So if you have a 6-lane pool, you would have stroke inspectors on each side, each watching 3 lanes. You each have half the pool. You follow your slowest swimmer. So you were always behind the slowest swimmer in your jurisdiction, and you have jurisdiction end wall to end wall. You signal by raising your hand just like a turn judge would on discovering a violation of the legal swimming stroke, kick, or body position. So if you don't have enough people for stroke inspectors, then we only have turn judges. We position the turn judges at the end of the pool. If you have no stroke inspectors, the turn judges have jurisdiction of 50% of the pool, meaning that you can call anything you can see within your 50% of the pool. Turn judges, you need to make sure that you are standing in a position that you have an unobstructed view of your swimmers. We also don't recommend that you try and run from lane to lane as your swimmers are coming in. Find one spot in your jurisdiction and stay there. Turn judges examine the last stroke prior to the turn. They watch the turn and they watch the exit from the turn until the completion of the first full stroke and the finishes of the competitors in their assigned lanes. You also signal by one hand overhead with an open palm immediately upon observing a violation of the legal turn or finish. So the minute you see a call, your hand must go up. Then your hand goes down. You cannot stand there with your hand up in the air for a long time, because then other swimmers may think that they've been disqualified when in fact they have not. You must report your violation to your referee. So all violations called by stroke and turn judges must go to the referee because the referee has final jurisdiction over your call. Relay takeoff judges. We have always used dual confirmation in Utah. We think that is the only fair way to actually judge a relay. Takeoff judges assume a position at the starting end of the side of the pool, and usually, if you are a turn judge, you will also be a relay takeoff judge. This is an example of our relay takeoff sheets that every referee must provide at the meet. So referees need to print off a lot of relay takeoffs and bring them to the meet with you. Takeoff judges observe the second, third, and fourth swimmers to ensure at least 1 foot is in contact with the surface of the starting platform in front of the wedge during takeoff. So that means as a relay takeoff judge, you are standing on the edge of the pool or between blocks 3 and 4 looking out. You must watch the feet on the block. When the feet leave the block, you look down for the hand touching the touchpad. Dual confirmation is required from people looking at the swimmers from 2 different venues. So you will have one on the outside of the pool and one over here. If there's only 2 of you, you would watch 6 to 8 lanes from the sides of the pool. You make X's and O's on the relay takeoff sheet. On the relay takeoff sheet, you have lane 1. Then there are lane numbers 2, 3, and 4, representing swimmers 2, 3, and 4. Circles are good, X's are bad. Use circle or X directly over the number. After that, you compare slips. If there's dual confirmation of a bad takeoff, it is a disqualification. Remember, you only watch the feet on the block. When the feet leave the block, you look down for a hand. A judge shall be assigned to observe the departing swimmer's feet and then the touch of the incoming swimmer. You cannot try and watch the swimmer coming in to look for the touch. If you look up, the feet will be gone. Never raise your hand for a relay takeoff. So that is something that you just mark on your paper, but you don't raise your hand to indicate a disqualification, because with dual confirmation, you don't know if your partner has also seen the same infraction. So it's only afterwards that you compare your slips. They go to the meet referee. The meet referee determines if there is a disqualification and informs the team. You can, for other meets, you can use one takeoff judge in the rule book, but in Utah, as I've said, we have always used dual confirmation because dual confirmation gives the benefit of the doubt to the swimmer. Somebody watching from one vantage point might see that the incoming swimmer actually touched very deep, when if the person in the lane actually could see that touch and would know that it was a good takeoff. So dual confirmation always on our relays. Okay, on page 44, in situations and rulings. Situation 4.6.1, Situation A. In a pre-meet officials meeting, the referee instructs the relay takeoff judges to visually sight first the feet on the takeoff of the departing swimmer, then the touch on the incoming swimmer's hand. The relay takeoff judge must also observe the second, third, and fourth swimmers to make sure that 1 foot is in contact with the starting platform surface in the front of the wedge. This is correct. So when they're talking about the wedge on the starting platform, they're talking about that movable wedge. They must have 1 foot on the block. They cannot have 2 feet back on that wedge. That only applies to the second, third, and fourth swimmers. So 1 foot must be on the starting platform. Section 7 is finish judges. This is something that the referee does. In addition to, they can ask the starter to also help. The finish judge is somebody that just basically writes down the finish as the swimmers finish. It may be 3, 4, 1, 2, 5, 6. However they finish, you write it on your paper. Then if there is a problem with the timing system, they have that referee's finish order to go back and compare to. It's another piece of the puzzle in case there's problems. Section 45, or page 45, section 8 is our timing equipment operator. It is really a good thing if all officials learn to be familiar with the timing equipment. The timing equipment operator is responsible for the automatic and semi-automatic timing equipment. So as a referee, you need to know that you know how to run that equipment in case they have a problem. The timing equipment has to be located, usually up by the end of the pool, so that they can see all the turns and finishes and know if there's a mistouch. So that's something that as a referee, you get there, you make sure that the timing equipment operator is in a good place and that everything is plugged in and working. Timers. We need to have timers. We need to have people with watches at every one of our meets. There should be a chief timer. That chief timer's job is to have 2 watches in their hands. They would start both watches, and then if somebody doesn't get a start, they can raise their hand and get a new watch from the chief timer. There should be a lane timer assigned to each lane. That person records the times, and they can also help push backup buttons. We don't always have a lot of timers. The most important thing to get every time is the backup button. So we want at least 1 backup button and 1 watch for every lane. The meet management software operator, this is another thing that the referee needs to be familiar with. They report to the referee, and so if there's a problem with the high tech, the meet referee needs to know how to help them resolve the problem. That software operator is responsible for using the software. They produce the seating, the event, the heats, and make sure everything's correct before it's posted. They produce heat sheets and result sheets for each session. They ensure the final results are in the meet score. So after the meet's concluded, that software operator must print the meet results so that the referee can check the results, make sure all the DQs are correct, and then sign them. We don't always have a recorder, and the scoring is usually done by the high tech. We should have an announcer, but at pools without an announcer, they can inform the visiting team that they do not have an announcing system, they do not have an announcer, and that coach needs to know that they can go to the timing system operator at any time and receive the scores up to the last event. Meet management. This is how our meets run. It's the event in order for all meets. First, you have a 200 medley relay, then you have the 200-yard freestyle, the 200-yard individual medley, the 50 freestyle. Usually at this point, most of our meets take a 10-minute break in where the diving used to be. It can be longer. It's whatever mutual consent by the coaches are. Following the break, we have a 100-yard butterfly, 100-yard freestyle, 500-yard freestyle, the 200-yard freestyle relay, the 100-yard backstroke, the 100-yard breaststroke, and the 400-yard freestyle relay. This is the order of events at all high school meets. The rule book says there shall be a break of at least 15 minutes with at least 10 minutes warm up in the water prior to the 100-yard butterfly. So after the 50 freestyle, usually what you do is you clear the pool and then you say the pool is now open for warm up and allow the swimmers back into the pool for warm up or cool down. Seating. The seating is usually done by high tech. It's not something our officials need to worry about. So when you get there, it's usually already seated, it's already printed, it's ready to go. You just need to check with the host team and make sure that they're running it correctly with the proper teams in the proper lanes, and find out about extra heats that they may be running in extra events for other swimmers to swim. Just familiarize yourself with everything and how the meet is to be run. Every meet is different. They can be dual meets, they can be tri-meets, they can be invitationals, so the seating changes with each format of meets. Qualifying procedures. We don't really have prelims and finals, so we don't worry a lot about qualifying in prelims for a finals meet. Timing and judging. On page 52, the official time shall be recorded to the 100th of a second. When timing devices that calibrate to the 1,000th of a second, the last decimal place shall be dropped, so it's always to 100th. Manual timing is a stopwatch. When timing a race, each swimmer shall start the watch instantly at the sound flash of the starting device and stop the watch at the instant the competitor being timed touches the finish end or pad. The official time when 3 watches record different times is the time of the middle watch. So if you have 3 watches and you have a problem, the middle watch is the time. You do not average the 3 watches. If you have 2 watches, that is the average time. So if you have 3 watches, it's the middle time. If you have 2 watches, you need to average it. Automatic timing and judging. Automatic timing equipment is a uniform electronic start and a finish pad. Backup systems are the semi-automatic buttons. So semi-automatic is the electronic finish or electronic start, and then the finish would be the backup button being pushed by the timer. When recorded by a properly operating automatic timing and judging system, the pad time shall be the official time, and the order of finish shall be determined by the integration of these times. The use of automatic relay judging equipment is permissible. So if you have a pool that they have the relay pads on the blocks and they have been calibrated properly, we can use those. The backup system using at least 1 manual timing device for each lane shall be operated in all meets. That means you must have a watch. The backup system shall be operative for all races but shall be used only for lanes in which the automatic equipment malfunctions. The relative order of finish for competitors in lanes in which the equipment functions properly shall not be changed during the integration of backup times. A difference of more than 0.3 seconds between automatic and backup times indicates a potential malfunction. If you ever look at the timing system console, you will see that when a race finishes, there could be highlighted lanes. What this is telling the operator is to look at those lanes more carefully because it's indicating there could have been a problem. So if you have a total disaster and you get a late start, so the starter says take your mark, hits the button, swimmers enter the water, and then the timing system person is going, I didn't get a start, I didn't get a start. You need to make sure that that timing system operator needs to hit manual start. If you get a manual start, you can fix everything with the watch backup. On page 54, there is a little diagram of what to do. So you have your primary pad times, which are obviously slower because it was a manual start than your watch times. So for each lane, you get the difference between the primary pad time and the watch time. You take those 6 differences, you add them up, you get a differential, which is down at the bottom of 4.91. 4.91 is then added onto the primary pad time, and that becomes the official time. It's very simple, but your operator that is operating your timing system needs to know if they don't get a start, they don't just sit there and then at the end of the race say, I didn't get a start. This is what communication before the meet helps. They need to know that there's a button on that system that says manual start, and they need to hit it the minute they realize that there was no start. Backup judging system. A ballot system may be used as a backup judging system for failure of automatic or semi-automatic judging and timing equipment, or as a primary system whenever automatic or semi-automatic judging and timing equipment is not available. 2 finish judges are required for that, 1 on each side of the pool at the finish wall, to determine independently the order of the finish of the swimmers. Usually we have enough systems in place that we never have to default to that. If you ever do default to that, the swimmers of course would not get a time, they would only get their place and points. Timers need to read their watches independently. What this is referring to is your timers can't compare their watch to a scoreboard and then write down the time on the board instead of the time on their watch. So you need to instruct their timers that they have to write down their times. The chief timer can collect the timing pieces of paper as needed. A lot of teams will run a continuous sheet for the timers and then go out and collect times as they need them. If decisions of judges differ, the order of finish for each swimmer is determined by adding the numerical value of the place given that swimmer by each judge and the numerical value of the official time. For example, in the 50-yard freestyle, if swimmers A, B, and C have identical times of 22.10 and D has a time of 22.20, then A, B, and C receive the ballot value of 1 and D receives 2. The swimmers having the lowest total is the winner. If 2 or more swimmers have identical totals, the result is a tie. So this all comes into play. A lot of the software helps with all these situations that go on. If, as a referee, you ever need to make a judge's decision on placement, there is a place in the software to do this. You cannot change a swimmer's time. But you can if you know that somebody placed first, but you cannot change their time to make them first. You go into judge's decision, you do a placement adjustment, but not a time adjustment. You cannot change their times. Scoring is done all usually by the computer. Every meet scores differently. It depends on the lanes, it depends on the type of meet. You need to be familiar with the scoring that is being used as a referee. So there's always a maximum score in any type of meet. You need to know what that is, and you need to check with the computer that it is set up properly by the rule book for the scoring. There can only be so many individuals on a team that can score. Those scoring individuals are supposed to be designated in the computer as the scoring individuals. Relays always score double. If there is a tie by 2 or more competitors for any place, the points are added together and divided equally. And that concludes that portion of our rule book.
Okay, we are on page 58, Rule 8, Swimming Events. We're going to do Section 1, Starts and Finishes. The forward start is used upon the command, take your mark. The swimmer shall promptly assume a stationary position with their foot or feet at the front edge of the platform or the pool deck. When all swimmers are stationary, the starter shall activate the starting device. In the note, with the referee's permission, a swimmer may start in the water. The swimmer shall step into the water feet first and must be stationary and have at least one hand in contact with the starting platform or end wall. The backstroke start is not permitted. We also have cases where there's application for our swimmers that have special needs. At this point, at the very beginning of the meet, the the coach should come and approach the referee and say, I have a Down syndrome child, and this is the way they would like to start. Or I have a hearing impaired, and this is the way she would like to start. And there are ways that we accommodate these special need swimmers to allow them to compete and still conform with the rules in the book. Okay. Article 2, for the backstroke, the swimmer shall step into the water, feet first, and facing the starting platform with both hands, in contact with the end pool or starting platform. Upon the command, take your mark, the swimmer shall promptly assume a stationary position. When all swimmers are stationary, the starter shall activate the starting device. Prior to the command, take your mark, and until the feet leave the wall at the starting signal, the swimmer's feet, including the toes, shall not be curled over the lip of the gutter or the edge of the pool. Standing in or on the gutter, placing the toes above the lip of the gutter or curling the toes over the gutter before or after the start is prohibited. Once the starter has called them up, take your mark, the starter is looking to make sure that the toes are not curled over the gutter. Once the starting device sound has been sounded, it is now the stroke and turn official's job to look at those toes to make sure they do not curl up over the gutter after the start. Okay? There is dual confirmation by the referee and the starter for a false start, and they do it independently. If the starter sees something, they circle the number of the swimmer on their sheet. If the referee sees something, they circle the number. There's no discussion. They simply show their paperwork to one another. If they have the same number of swimmers circled, then there is a false start charged. Okay? Article 7, the finish of the race is when the swimmer shall contact the finish end in the manner prescribed, and when automatic timing and judging equipment is used, the swimmer must contact the touchpad or end wall between the lane lines where the touchpad should be located when in proper position. Sometimes those touchpads slide out of at where they need to be. So if they finish on the end wall and the touchpad should have been there, that is the finish. Okay? Now, we're going to talk in another section about starts, but I'm just going to preface that the starter and the referee do look for false starts, and it's dual confirmation when they see a false start. Now, a swimmer can pull another swimmer off by movement. The referee has to be watching all of this, and it's all in their realm, their peripheral vision, what's going on the blocks. Okay? If a swimmer jerks, if swimmer in lane 4 jerks before the start but comes back into place, but lane 5 goes in on that motion of lane 4, then you'll stand the swimmers back up and you will not charge lane 5 that false start because you as the referee could see what went on. But there are instances when we do have a disqualification. Okay? Now we're going to go ahead and move into our form of individual events, starting off with the backstroke. The videos that we are going to be watching are USAA made videos, and they have been done in 2015, and they're done very well. The only problem is the backstroke in USAA is different from high school. We are a little more lenient, and so when you watch the video, there's going to tell you certain things that you cannot do. Right now I'm going to tell you what you can do, okay? So the backstroke start is used. The long whistle is blown and inviting you into the water. A second long whistle is blown, telling you to place your feet and be ready for the start. On the backstroke, any stroke is permitted and any kick is permitted. It's simply staying on your back, okay? You may not stand in or curl your toes over the gutter at the start or after the start. The swimmer may be completely submerged during the turn and for a distance of not more than 16.4 yards. We're going to talk a lot about 15-meter marks in our swimming. The 15-meter mark is marked usually on the lane line with a different colored buoy, and it is 16.4 yards from the start end and 16.4 yards from the turn end. If it is not marked on the buoys, then you need to place an orange cone at 16.4 yards on either end. So when you're starting the backstroke, you're starting at the start end. It is the farthest 15-meter mark from the start end. That's where you're judging. The head must surface at that point. When they turn, it's the nearest 15-meter mark that they're looking at, that the head has to surface. Okay? We're going to talk a lot about pass vertical. What does pass vertical mean? In the backstroke, pass vertical is the shoulders, the top shoulder in correlation with the bottom shoulder. If you are straight up and down in the water, you are okay. Or that top shoulder needs to be turned ever so slightly so that your breast is facing the ceiling. That is pass vertical toward your back. If that shoulder is turned towards the water, you are pass vertical towards your breast. And we're going to talk a lot about that, so keep that in mind. A lot of people don't understand pass vertical. When they get to the 15-meter mark, some portion of their head must break the surface of the water. After breaking the surface of the water, the swimmer must remain on the surface, and some part of the swimmer's body has to be above the surface except for the turn. The turn requires that some part of the swimmer's body must contact the end wall. After the swimmer's head has passed the backstroke flag, prior to the turn, the swimmer's upper shoulder may pass, but is not required to rotate past the vertical towards the breast before the touch is completed, provided such rotation is accompanied by initiating action into the wall. The initiation of the turning action shall be accomplished by a single arm pull or a double arm pull or in absence of the pull. They don't have to pull on their stomach. And an upward or downward motion of the head. After the initiation of the turning action, there shall be no extra arm pulls, but kicking and gliding into the wall is permissible. That'll be different from the video. They want you to do a continuous flip turn into the wall. High school is a little more lenient. It's slower, so they're not penalizing the swimmers for being slower. They are allowed to take that one arm or two arm pull down on their stomach. They can kick and glide into the wall. They do not have to flip turn. They can choose to flip turn if they wish. Reaching up for the touch for the turn is not considered a second stroke because this is a recovery. If they were to pull back down again, it would be a second stroke. But reaching up for the touch is not a second stroke. The swimmer has to assume position, pass vertical towards the back before the feet leave the wall. Remember, straight up and down is okay, or else that upper shoulder needs to be turned so their breast is facing the ceiling. The finish requires the completion of the required distance and contact with the finish pad or end wall where the finish pad should be with any part of the swimmer's body, but they have to be above the surface of the water. They cannot be totally submerged, okay? Now it's really hard to judge this because you're watching down like this, you're watching for the touch of the swimmer coming in. You can't see what that toe is doing out there. The only time it's really easy to call totally submerged for the finish is if your side judge is watching it coming in and they totally dive under the water and come in for the touch. Now, the video is going to talk about a backstroke ledge in Utah or in high school. They are not allowed. This backstroke ledge you'll see at the very beginning is not allowed in high school, so just ignore that. Also, if they miss the wall on their turn and they have not made forward progress towards the other end, they may scull back and touch with their toe, the end wall that they missed. So in the video, it is not allowed, but in high school, again, we are not going to penalize them for being slow. Okay, let's go watch the video. All right, just a reminder, from the UHSAA video to high school rules, kicking and gliding into the turn is permissible. You may do that. You do not have to do a flip turn. You can simply touch the wall on your stomach or even on your back, and when your feet leave the wall, be pass vertical towards your back again. Remembering that when you finish, you have to be on top of the water. Some part of your body has to be out of the water for the finish. Whether that be a toe or whatever, as you lunge for the wall. Okay, next up we will have our breaststroke.
Breaststroke. Breaststroke has also a body form. So the forward start shall be used for breaststroke, meaning at least 1 foot must be at the edge of the block. The body must remain on the breast except while executing a turn. On the start and the turn, 1 arm stroke beyond the hip line followed by 1 breaststroke kick may be made while the swimmer is underwater. Any time before that breaststroke kick, there may be 1 single butterfly kick. Some part of the head must break the surface of the water before the hands turn inward at the widest part of the second stroke after the stroke on each turn. So they get 1 pull past their hips. That is all that they can take past their hips. Their arms come back up, their arms go out. This is where the head must break the surface of the water before they turn in. The hands shall not be brought back beyond the hip line after that initial pull down. Some part of the head must break the water surface sometime during each stroke cycle. And it's important to remember in breaststroke that it is a cycle, and that cycle always starts with one arm pull. So it's one arm pull followed by one leg kick, except for after the final arm pull to the turn or finish. There can be no sculling of the hands at the end of the first arm stroke following the start or turn. So what that refers to is they can't pull down past their hips and then scull with their hands under the water. The stroke requires that the arms move simultaneously and in the same horizontal plane without any alternating movement. When they talk about horizontal plane, they are not talking about the horizontal plane of the earth. They are talking about in relationship to each other. So the hands must be in the same horizontal plane in relationship to each other. Both hands shall be pushed forward from the breast simultaneously on, above, or under the surface of the water. Breaststroke is a stroke that you could have 3 different athletes doing it and all of them would look differently, but they all could be legal. The elbows must remain under the water except for the last stroke at the turn or finish of the prescribed distance. A butterfly recovery is not permitted at any time, and when they talk about butterfly recovery, what they're talking about is up and over the water. So that is not permitted. The kick requires the feet be drawn up with the knees bent. The feet must be turned outward during the propulsive part of the kick. All movements of the legs and feet shall be simultaneous in the same horizontal plane, again, horizontal plane in relationship to each other. No scissors, flutter, or downward butterfly kick developed from a flexing and extending of the knees is permitted, except for that single butterfly kick that is allowed after the start and after each turn. The turn requires a simultaneous touch with 2 hands. So that is also not necessarily on the same plane, after which any manner of turn is permitted. The shoulders shall be at or past the vertical towards the breast when the feet leave the wall. So again, you're hearing the word vertical. We use the vertical as kind of our neutral place. You also hear when the feet leave the wall. So your eyes, after the turn is made, you're looking down at the feet. When the feet leave the wall, your eyes travel up the body to see that the swimmer has regained the position on the breast. They are not on their back or towards their back. The legal body position shall be regained prior to the first arm pull. The legal body position is on the breast. So what they're saying is that the swimmer can be in streamline, their feet leave the wall, they can be vertical in the water, but they must have turned onto the breast before they begin that first arm pull. The finish requires the completion of the required distance and contact with the finish pad when the automatic timing is used, or the finish end with both hands simultaneously, not necessarily on the same plane. So in breaststroke, everything is simultaneous and on the same horizontal plane. The touch can be very different, and you will see in the video that they will demonstrate the brush touch where one hand touches the wall and the other hand brushes down the wall. This is a legal touch provided it is done at the same time. It is very difficult to judge if your eyes do not see the one hand brushing the wall. You may only see one hand left on the wall and think that a double touch was not done. You must observe the entire touch and turn before you can make any type of disqualification. So let's watch the video.
Now we're going to move on to the butterfly. The forward start is used, and the body shall remain on the breast except while executing a turn. After the start and the turn, the swimmer is allowed 1 or more leg kicks, but only 1 arm pull under the water. That arm pull brings them to the surface. The stroke requires that both arms are simultaneously pulled backward under the water and simultaneously recover over the water. At any given corresponding points, both hands shall be at the same horizontal plane. The kick requires that both legs and feet move up and down simultaneously in a vertical plane. A scissors, breaststroke, or alternating up and down movements of the legs are not permitted. The turn requires a simultaneous touch with two hands, not necessarily on the same plane, after which any manner of turn is permitted. The shoulders shall be at or past the vertical towards the breast when the feet leave the wall, and the legal body position shall be regained prior to the first arm pull. So they must be on their breast before that first pull down. The swimmer may be completely submerged for not more than the 15-meter mark after the start and at each turn. By that point, some part of the head must have broken the surface of the water. After breaking the surface of the water, the swimmer must remain on the surface except for the turn and the finish. The finish of the butterfly requires the distance to be completed and contact with the finish pad when automatic timing is used, or the finish end, with both hands simultaneously, not necessarily on the same plane. Let's watch the video.
Okay, our next stroke is freestyle. Freestyle is probably the easiest thing to officiate. The forward start shall be used. That means that even if a swimmer is going to choose to do backstroke as their freestyle, they still must use a forward start. Any body position, any stroke, any kick is permitted, and any combination can be used, so they can do whatever they want. But the forward start must be used. The turn requires some part of the swimmer's body contact the end wall. The final leg of the individual medley and the medley relay requires the swimmer to be at or past the vertical toward the breast before any stroke, kick, or propulsive motion. So this is the only difference in freestyle. Is freestyle in like the 50 free, the 200 free, the 500 free, they can swim any stroke they want. They can do backstroke, they can do butterfly, they can do breaststroke. It is counted as a freestyle event. They cannot get a qualifying time in any other stroke during a freestyle event. But in the individual medley and the medley relay, the freestyle portion of those must be any stroke other than backstroke, breaststroke, or butterfly. In this stroke, there is also a 15-meter mark. The swimmer must be completely submerged for a distance of not more than 16.4 yards, which is the 15 meters, after the start on each turn. At that point, some part of the swimmer's head must have broken the surface of the water. After breaking the surface of the water, the swimmer must remain on the surface except for turns and finishes, so they cannot resubmerge and swim underwater again. The finish requires completion of the required distance and contact with the finish pad when automatic timing is used, or the finish end by any part of the swimmer. This is also one where if they miss a wall, they can go back and touch as long as they haven't made it to the other end and touch that wall. So if they miss a wall and swim away a little bit, they can go back and touch in freestyle. The next event is the individual medley. The individual medley begins with the forward start also. Competitors shall swim the butterfly for the first quarter of the required distance of the complete race, the backstroke for the second quarter, the breaststroke for the third quarter, and any stroke other than backstroke, breaststroke, or butterfly for the last quarter. And you need to note that each section must be finished in accordance with the finish rule for that style. So the only difference here is in backstroke, they must finish on their back before they may turn. You may see swimmers come in and do the barrel roll after they touch, but they must touch on their back. They cannot flip towards the breast and do a backstroke flip turn before going on. That would be a disqualification. Let's watch the video.
Okay, let's move on to page 68 and section 3, our relay events. The medley relay is swum by a team of 4 competitors, each swimming 1/4 of the required distance of the race. The first is backstroke, then breaststroke, butterfly, then followed by freestyle. Each swimmer shall adhere to the position, stroke, kick, and turn and finish rules governing each stroke. The freestyle relay is swum by 4 competitors, and they swim each quarter of the required distance any style they would like, adhering to the turn and finish rules of the freestyle event. If they choose to swim any other strokes, the time still counts only as a freestyle relay. The swimmers of the relay team must all use the forward start. The first swimmer of the relay team, once called to the starting platform, they cannot change his or her swimming order in that relay event with any teammate. On the takeoff, the second, third, and fourth swimmers in a relay team may be in motion. They may be on the block in motion as long coming from the back of the block to the front of the block. The swimmer shall remain in contact with the starting platform or pool deck until the previous swimmer has finished. However, moving from the back of the block to the front of the block is permitted again. The swimmer on the starting platform does not initiate the action from the pool deck. So if you're on the block, you can move from the back of the block to the front of the block in motion, swimmers 2 through 4. If you are deck starting, which some relay teams do, 1 foot has to be to the edge of the deck. The upper body can be in motion, but at least 1 foot has to be to the edge of the deck for the starting. You may not, when a starting wedge is used, the second, third, and fourth swimmer may not start from on top of that starting wedge. We've talked about that in the past. They have to have at least 1 foot in front of that wedge, contact with the starting platform, and 1 foot can be on the wedge. Each swimmer of the relay team must contact the finish end at the conclusion of their leg of the relay, accordance with the finish rule that applies to each stroke. However, only the final swimmer is required to contact the finish pad in accordance with Rule 8-1-7. The leadoff swimmer on any relay may be credited with an official time for his or her leg, provided all the requirements for the start, stroke, and finish are legal. A leadoff time remains valid if the relay team is disqualified due to a violation other than unsporting conduct by one of the subsequent competitors. A leadoff time shall be nullified should the relay team be disqualified for unsporting conduct or any rule under 3-6-1 or for any entry rule in 3-2. I'm going to remind you to read the situation and rulings after each one of these strokes. A lot of information and questions can be answered if you would just take the time to read and reread those. It's very good information. Also, I want to point out on page 93, it goes over the 2017-18 points of emphasis. On page 94, it goes over the rule changes for this rule book. And then on 96, 97, it goes over starter protocols and the no recall protocols in the book, as well as 98 has the electronic relay judging. It goes over those things too. And in the back of the book, we have guidelines for management of concussion, as well as you can go online and watch the concussion video that the National Federation has. On page 108, it is guidelines for blood, communicable diseases, and what to do in those situations. And we don't run our high school events outside, but the next page is on lightning and thunder. And then we are completed. Remember, I want to grab these pages. So when you go online, you'll print out the handouts. In the handouts has all the information that we've gone over today. Really, really great information about each of the strokes, and inside you will also find your relay takeoff sheets, the correct way to fill them out. It'll also have guidelines on your meeting with your coaches and your team captains, your officials meeting. It will give you a referee prep list, what to take to a meet, what things you need to do, as well as instructions that you can have for your head timer. We'll also include in that a referee for the referee people, an example of a referee sheet, and we will go over that in just a bit. with the referee starter information. There is the shirt order in there. If you would like to have a shirt, you can do that also. Our 500 lap counter sheets, as well as Chief Judge paperwork. I just want to reiterate reading the book over and over again. There's a lot of valuable information also online. The National Federation has put out a pamphlet for officials. It's taken information all across the United States and put together. It's well worth your time going online and reading through that. Anything that can help you. Also, if you show up on deck and ask your coaches if you could just be on deck and watch at practice. A lot of times we take our rule book, we go to practice and we watch the kids, because what the kids do in practice is what they're going to do when it comes swim meet time. That's how they're going to race. And you can watch what they're doing in the pool, read your rule book as per that swim, and really get your eyes accustomed to what you should be looking for in each of your strokes. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and turn the time over and talk about our referee section and our starter section. Now we're going to go over the PowerPoint of the differences, the changes that have been made to the rule book for this year. Inside the front cover, it gives a breakdown of what the rule changes are, as well as if you go into the back of the book, it goes into greater detail about the changes that were made in the rule book on page 93. So we'll go through this PowerPoint and touch on those differences that have been made. In meet management, so in Rule 1-3-12, it reads, Article 12, a championship meet is a culminating meet as determined by state association. And they've taken out an individual multi-team meet is not considered a championship meet, but may be conducted using championship format. And they have stated that a non-championship meet may be conducted using the non-championship format. So you can run any meet you'd like in the championship format. Equipment for swimming events. A visual lap counting system for the 500 or 400 meter freestyle shall be required for each visitor swimmer's lane. The system shall consist of sufficient number of white cards with 12 inches tall black odd ascending or descending numbers and one solid fluorescent orange card with or without a numeral. That has to be. Uniforms. Rule 3-3-2A, Article 2. The uniform consists of a suit and caps if worn, and it may display the competitor's name, a school nickname, and school logo. Lap counter, Rule 3-4. The lap counter shall be positioned on the deck at the end of the pool opposite the starting end within the lateral limits of the lane of the competitor for whom is counting. The lap counter changes the visual counter to the next higher or lower odd number or the fluorescent orange card as the competitor makes each turn at the starting end. The solid fluorescent orange card is shown to indicate the final length of the race. The visual counter may not be supplemented by a verbal count. Conduct rule. Article 1. No team or personnel competing shall display unsporting conduct. This includes any act the referee deemed unsporting, including but not limited to the following. We went over this earlier in the book. Nothing has changed. Making insulting or derogatory remarks, gestures, or acts including taunting. Trying to influence or show disgust of the official's decision, interfering with the meet officials in their performance of their duties, deck changing on, during, before, or after the meet, the use of electronic devices transmitted information to the competitor during the race or the dive, use any form of tobacco product from the time the team personnel arrive at the site of the competition until they leave. Following competition of the meet, that goes with the tobacco, performing on-site shaving before, during, or after the meet. That is a definite big no-no. The National Federation disapproves of any form of taunting which is intended to or designed to embarrass, ridicule, or demean others under any circumstance. The team personnel or the competitor shall be disqualified from further participation in the meet, including all the events in which the competitor previously qualified for unsporting conduct. For excessive unsporting conduct, a team or personnel as defined in 1.4-2 may be ejected from the competition area. So the conduct rule 3-6, all of this is new in Article 2. No team personnel or competitor shall display unacceptable conduct. This includes any act the referee deems unacceptable, including but not limited to the following: willful failure to follow the direction of a meet official, using profanity, whether or not it's directed at someone, or any action which could bring discredit to the individual or to his or her school, not swimming in his or her assigned lane throughout the race and interfering with another swimmer in another lane, contacting or walking on the bottom of the pool for the purpose of gaining an advantage, not leaving the pool promptly when requested to do so by the referee. The penalty is the team, personnel, or competitor shall be disqualified from that event or the next event, whichever is appropriate. Conduct Rule 3-6, Article 3, when a spectator becomes unruly or interferes with the orderly progress of the meet, the referee shall suspend the meet until meet management can resolve the situation and the meet can proceed in an orderly manner. Article 4, no team, personnel, or competitor shall enter the water without the referee's approval. Penalties: all participants from the team shall be disqualified from the race or heat when a non-participating team member enters the water during the race and/or the person disqualified from further competition. 2, a competitor shall be disqualified from the event for A, entering the water before the race without the referee's approval, B, re-entering the water during the race without the referee's approval, C, in the case of diving, which we'll just eliminate that since we aren't doing diving. 3, when all competitors in the event have completed a race and a competitor in the event enters or re-enters the water without the referee's approval, that competitor shall be disqualified from his or her next scheduled event. Authorized officials, Rule 4-1-8, this is new. No participant, coach, administrator, or game official shall use alcohol or any form of tobacco product, e-cigarette, or similar items, beginning with the arrival at the competition site until the departure from the site and completion of the contest. Not acceptable. Relay takeoff judges, Rule 4-6-1, Article 1. Takeoff judges shall assume a position at the starting end of the side of the pool, at the starting end to observe first the feet on the takeoff of the departing swimmer and then the touch of the incoming swimmer's hand. Takeoff judges shall also observe the second, third, and fourth swimmer to ensure that at least 1 foot is in contact with the starting platform in front of the wedge during takeoff. Relay takeoff judges, Rule 4-6-4. For championship meets, dual confirmation is required. Relay events, Rule 8-3-5A, B, and C. On the takeoff, the second, third, and fourth swimmer on a relay may be in motion before the previous swimmer finishes. The swimmer shall remain in contact with the starting platform or pool deck until the previous swimmer has finished. However, moving from the back of the starting platform to the front is permitted, provided the swimmer is on the starting platform and does not initiate the action from the pool deck. A, on starts from the deck, the second, third, and fourth swimmer must use the forward start with at least 1 foot at the edge of the deck. The body may be in motion, but no intentional movement of the feet is permitted. B, For in-water starts, the second, third, and fourth swimmer need only maintain contact with the end wall with a foot until the previous swimmer has finished. C. When starting block wedges are installed, the second, third, and fourth swimmer must have 1 foot in contact with the surface of the starting platform in front of the wedge during the takeoff. These are major editorial changes. The FINA mark and/or individual barcode that are on certain swimsuits designate that the suit has been approved by FINA and/or the USA Swimming Competition. It is not considered to be a second manufacturer logo nor any form of advertising. Such swimsuits with a FINA marking shall be legal for National Federation competition if otherwise legal. Suit coverage. As per Rule 3-1, student athletes should wear uniforms of decent appearance, including suit coverage. If individuals or teams are in violation of this rule, officials are encouraged to contact the head coach of the offending team rather than the student and request that the student athletes be appropriately equipped with uniforms that meet specific standards. It is the coach's responsibility to ensure that all of their swimmers are suited in a legal attire. Accommodation for disabled athletes. Accommodations for students with special needs may be addressed through the rules and policies set forth by a variety of organizations: the Special Olympics, Disabled Sports USA, and the U.S. Paralympics, USA Swimming, etc. In addition, by state association, additional accommodations can be made provided to those who do not fundamentally alter the sport, heighten the risk, or place opponents at a disadvantage. There is a level of authority that you should go through. Inclusion of students with disabilities and guidelines for school and state association for consideration of accommodations. It first is requested from the student to the school, and then the school contacts the individual student assessment, request for school and accommodations to the state association, then the notice and opportunity to be heard. The state association reviews the request, then they provide a written determination what the accommodation is to the school, and if appropriate, the school provides a letter of authorization to the head official or local contest allowing the competition to go forward. In the past, we've had several instances. Take an example. We had a boy in a really terrible bike accident. He was a butterflyer. He wasn't even expected to be able to get in the pool and swim. He was a senior, so of course he wanted to swim his senior year. He could not move his right side of the body, his arms and his legs he could not do. And of course our rule says that both arms have to recover over the water for the breaststroke. The coach contacted me. I told them they needed to contact the state association, which they did. And through the state association, we were able to look at the swimmer and see if he could follow the butterfly rule, if without moving the right side of his body, if he could follow that rule completely, as if he did not have a right arm. And he was able to. So a letter of accommodation was written for him that he could take to every meet and show the referee that they were to judge him as if he did not have a right arm. And that way he was able to compete. So we do have situations that come out that the athletes need a letter of recommendation to be able to be allowed to swim. And thankfully we have that. During the warm-up, meet directors and coaches are encouraged to review the suggested meet warm-up procedure, which is located in the front of the rule book. Supervision, safety suggestions for pace, sprint lanes, practice lanes, lane selection, and other pertinent issues are highlighted to aid the organization, and precautionary measures suggested prior to hosting a meet. If you follow the meet suggested warm-ups, it'll be a safe warm-up. Valid times with a single manual watch. The referee is responsible for making decisions on matters that are not specifically covered in the rule book. In case of a timing malfunction, he or she is expected to utilize all the other information and data, such as his or her place pick of order on the finish, times on other lanes, etc., to make sure that the single data point, the watcher button, is reasonably accurate. Referees have the authority to reject times that are clearly inaccurate and determine the place without accessing a specific time to a swimmer. Responsibility of the swimmer in a distance event. When the counter malfunctions, the lap counter is inadvertently dropped to the bottom of the pool. It is the responsibility of the swimmer to know their lap count and to continue the race. Accidental error by the counter should not result in a disqualification of any swimmer. Position statement on officials' role. The rules for swimming and diving exist to ensure fair competition in a positive, safe, and healthy environment. Athlete performances in swimming and diving inevitably involve both physical and emotional components. When enthusiastic responses accompany or follow an athlete's performance in competition, officials should be careful to avoid intervention unless absolutely necessary. If a celebratory response violates Rule 3-6-1 and 2 and is considered unsporting or unacceptable, it should be sanctioned accordingly. If you go to the National Federation website, there is a lot of learning tools that are available to you there. You just need to go and look around and find all the stuff that's there to make you and help you be the best official possible. Thank you. We'll move on now to starting and refereeing.
Okay, we are going to start with referee. Our high school meets must be sometimes run with a minimum officials. Sometimes you are both referee and starter, as we have talked about. You also may be a referee and a stroke and turn judge. If there's not enough people, you could be watching stroke and turn. As a referee, it's your job to ensure the integrity of the competition as well as give instruction to your deck officials. So, to start off with, when you get to the pool, you're going to check your blocks, you're going to make sure they're tight. You're going to check your starting system. You're going to make sure that somebody actually plugged this in and it's ready to go. You're going to make sure that this is placed properly on the pool deck. It's usually put right back by the backstroke pole so that this strobe needs to be visible to all of the athletes. The strobe is for the athletes, not the timers. So check that out, make sure it's working. Make sure that the proper cables are plugged in to all the little outlets. There's a start output, there's the mic. That's the referee's job to make sure that this is all ready before the starter gets there. After you've checked your deck, you've talked to your computer operators, it's time to have a meeting with your officials. So you're going to gather whoever is there, visiting team, your team, whoever you've got to work with, and you're going to explain how you're going to run the meet. First thing with your officials, make sure they're all in their uniform. Make sure your officials are not showing any team colors from the team that they're with. Officials are not part of a team once they get there to work. You are part of the officials team, not part of your child's swim team. So your officials are all properly attired, everybody's ready to go. You're going to go through with your officials the pool configuration. Have you got a pool that you can only do stroke or only do turns? You can only stroke 3/4 of the way. This is all decisions of the referee. Remember, you have the authority over all of your officials and you have to give them clear assignments and instructions before the meet begins. If anybody has questions relating to the conduct of the meet, you're the one that's going to make the decisions before the meet starts on how the meet's going to be conducted. So after you've done that, before the meet begins, you're going to have your quick meeting with your timers. And in your packet that you have printed off, we have all these little helps for you on what to do in your meetings. This is your meeting with coaches and team captains. Just little reminders of things that you want to talk about. Instructions for your timers. So you go through the timers. This is how it's going to be run. This is what I want you to do. One of the jobs of timers is to make sure that they've got the proper swimmer in the proper lane. So they ask the swimmer when they get there, are you so-and-so? So that everybody's in the right place. Your timers are the ones that can help you with this. So you've got all these little helps in your packet that you need to print off, and you need to carry them with you to the meet in your briefcase. There's a little prep list that we've given you that you can go through this little list and make sure you've got all these things in your mind that you've got to do. So part of the things that you have to give your officials, one of the instructions is they cannot cheer. You as a referee need to make sure that they understand that they are not on deck to get the best view of their child swimming. There is no cheering. There is also no cell phone use when you're an official. So they can't have their cell phone in their back pocket and keep pulling it out to check text messages or take calls or whatever. Everything like that needs to be put away at the start of a meet. So after you've assigned your jurisdiction according to how many officials you have, make sure that you tell your officials that when they're judging, if they've got 2 empty lanes and only 1 swimmer in their jurisdiction, they cannot just stare at that 1 swimmer. Their eyes still need to shift. These are instructions that come from the referee. Let's also talk about the benefit of the doubt goes to the swimmer. That's something to kind of remind everybody that if they're not exactly sure of what they saw, they can raise their hand, make the call, but they can also take a call back. So if they raise their hand, hand goes up, hand goes down, they come give the call to the referee, but then they have to discuss with the referee the call. Maybe they're not comfortable with it. As a referee, you can decide not to accept the call, or you can also explain to your deck officials that they can take a call back. If they decide that they aren't quite comfortable with what they called, it's just fine to say, I'm not going to do that call. Make sure your officials know that they can't walk off the deck. If you all of a sudden look out and you've got empty spots and you don't know where your officials are, then you have an unbalanced deck. So as a referee, you've got to make sure that the whole deck is balanced for fair and equitable judging. Make sure that they understand relay takeoffs. Go through how exactly you want your relay takeoff cards filled out. Give the officials their relay takeoff cards for the proper amount of relays that they're going to do, and reiterate to them about watching feet leave the block and then look for a hand. Make sure your stroke judges or somebody, if it's a turn judge that has to walk around to the side of the pool, is watching the 15-meter mark for the backstroke, the freestyle, and the butterfly. So we need a judge on that 15-meter mark for the starts. When you give your jurisdictions out to your officials, that's part of the jurisdiction, is explaining to them where you want people to stand at the starts and where they should move to as they move around the deck. Remember as a referee that you can disqualify any swimmer in the pool, but we always ask you to be very careful about that, because you may have lane 6 right in front of you. Well, could you make the same call in lane 1 that you're making in lane 6? If you can't fairly make that call, then you shouldn't be making the call, unless your official that's over that lane has been distracted and you know that they had their back turned or somebody had distracted them and they didn't see it. Then at that point, you should go ahead and raise your hand. But if as a referee, you're constantly raising your hand and making calls over the top of your officials, you're going to kind of intimidate your officials and make them think that they're not doing a good job. Referee is a job that we don't like to be traded around. So it's not a job that you take turns being the referee. Somebody on the team needs to decide who is going to be the referee so that person can train in that job and be comfortable. If you keep trading and I'm the referee this time and you're a turn judge next time, nobody's ever going to become competent in the job. Remember, you also need to instruct your officials if there's no hand raised, there's no disqualification. A hand must go up for the disqualification. If they did not raise their hand, you cannot accept that disqualification. You may not have seen it, and so you need to ask, did you raise your hand? Remember that you're the only one on the deck that wears the whistle. That designates you as the referee. So you wear a whistle, no one else does. The whistle commands only come from the referee. It is the 5 to 6 short whistles. The Red Cross has asked us not to use the 3. So it's 5 to 6 short whistles and then 1 long whistle to instruct the swimmers to either step onto the block or step into the water. In the backstroke, there is a second long whistle after they have stepped in that asks the swimmers to please come place their feet, place their hands, get ready for the start. Referees have to wear a lot of hats, and you have to be a good person at multitasking, because you could be watching the pool, watching your officials, and have the timing system, people waving at you that they've got a problem. So you've got to remain calm, you've got to keep the meet going, and just relax. Now we will move on to starter. Robin, do you want to come be a starter? Okay, remember, you're the starter, and you're the famous one on the deck. Everyone hears your voice. If you screw up, everyone sees what you've done wrong. You have one responsibility, and that is to get those swimmers into the water fairly and equitably. It is important that every competitor is given the same advantage and a fair start within the rules. That's one thing you need to realize, is you have to stay within the rules. So the starter should review the rules and events and establish a protocol with the meet referee. So you're going to talk to each other. You can't always stand together. It may be a meet where there's not enough officials, and so the starter's on one end of the pool and the referee's across the pool from them. So you have to talk to each other, figure out how you're going to do your false starts. So the referee blows the whistles. The starter knows that the swimmers are going to step up. One long whistle. After that, arm goes out.
Take your mark.
That's all there is. The starter does not use any other language other than take your mark. It is not take your marks. It is not swimmers take your marks. It is plain and simple, take your mark. The only other thing the starter may do is if the swimmers don't all come down, if you see somebody wiggling, if you see somebody having a problem, you just simply say, please stand. A lot of people can't even understand what you're saying over these microphones, and that's why we talk as little as possible. So, as the starter, at the commencement of each heat, the referee signals to the swimmers with the short whistles, no fewer than 4, to remove their warm-ups, put on their goggles, one long whistle, they step up. When the swimmers and the officials are ready, the referee signals with the extended arm, and you keep your arm out. If you do this, the starter may not have seen that your hand went out. So your hand goes out and it stays out through the start. You put your arm down after the swimmers have started. On the starter's command, take your mark. The swimmers shall immediately assume their starting position in the forward start with at least 1 foot on the front of the block, and in the backstroke, toes must not be curled over the gutter. When all swimmers are stationary, the starter shall give the starting signal. Notice the word stationary. We are not saying motionless. It is stationary, which means that you may see a heel wiggle or you may see a twitch in a muscle. That is not a false start. A false start is when a swimmer leaves the starting position early. So we use our little glass box scenario where you put a glass box over the swimmer. The swimmer comes down, they take their mark. As long as they do not go forward, backward, or up and break the glass box, it is not a false start. You just need to remember that stationary does not mean motionless. So you're going to see little twitches or a head may move. Things like that are okay. When a swimmer does not respond promptly to the command, take your mark, the starter shall release all swimmers with the command, stand up. upon which the swimmers may stand up but not step off the blocks unless instructed to do so. They don't have to step off. Then the starter would wait a second or two and again give the command, take your mark. Any swimmer gaining an unfair advantage at the start will be disqualified. We have a no recall false start, meaning that the starter says, take your mark. The starter realizes after they've hit the water that lane 4 left early. The starter simply takes their heat sheet, circles lane 4, turns to the referee and says, did you see anything? The referee, who may also have circled what they saw, compares to the starter. They both have lane 4. Lane 4 is disqualified after the swim. It is a no recall false start. There may be a reason during an event to do a recall, and that is why we have said you need to either have a recall device or a recall rope. The recall device can be the starter. The starter has a built-in beep, 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 beep. So you hit it once for the start, and then hold it down. When holding it down after the first initial start, you will get the beep, 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 beep. Most kids are not familiar with a recall anymore, and they won't stop. So if that happens, you may need to rest that heat before you re-swim for whatever reason you recalled for. The first start is the best start for all athletes, and that is why we don't want to use recalls. We want the no recall false start. We don't also like starters that stand people up a lot. If you start to stand the kids up, they're going to get very nervous. They're not going to know what you do. So if you're constantly saying stand up, stand down, do this, do that, swimmers aren't going to trust you. The swimmers look for confidence in their starter, and if you are confident and have control of the situation, they will relax, they will get used to the flow of the meet, and you will have perfect starts. But if you start to say stand up, they're going to start to look at you wondering, are you going to let us go or are you going to stand us up? Also, you need to be aware every swimmer has the right to find their mark. So you may have a swimmer that comes down and never stops and falls in the water. That is not a false start. That swimmer never found their mark. At that point, you release the rest of the field to stand up. That swimmer gets out of the water, back on the block, and you start again. People don't understand sometimes why a swimmer that came down and fell in the water is disqualified, and then the next time they're not disqualified. It's all in if they have found their mark. Their mark is their stationary position. Once they have found their stationary position, they may not leave it. Starters have a great responsibility. They need to see that one swimmer does not gain an advantage over the others. This sometimes happens with the swimmer that comes down slowly. They kind of watch, and when everybody else has come down, they decide to come down and take their mark. That means that those other swimmers have had to hold their position longer than the one that came down last. Good starters do not let swimmers do this. The first time it happens, you quickly stand them up. You instruct lane 4 to respond promptly to your command. If the swimmer continues to do it, they can be disqualified for a delay. Usually once you've warned them, they will come down. Patience is the best thing you can have when you're starting. If you have patience and realize that you can have a very, very experienced swimmer in lane 4 and a child that's never done this before in lane 1. You're going to have all kinds of swimmers on the blocks at the same time, and you have to be patient. You have to let them learn how to start correctly. You also have to protect your competitors. You can't let anyone gain an unfair advantage. As the starter, you are the person on the deck with the spotlight shining on you. You're the one that has to get those swimmers into the water fairly. So we ask you to practice your voice. You don't want to scare them off the blocks. It's a very, very simple, take your mark. It's the same thing as saying, close the door. You have to go down, down, down. Once you've practiced enough, muscle memory will take over and you will say it without having to think about it. So practice when you're alone. Go to your kids' practice and ask the coach to get the starting equipment out so that you can familiarize yourself with it. Learn how to use the button. Some of the mics, you have to put them right up. If you don't put it up against your mouth like this, nobody will be able to hear you. You cannot hold this mic out here and talk. It won't work. They won't hear a word you say. So go and learn your equipment. Play with it. Have the kids do starts with you at practice. Your kids will be your best people to criticize you, I think. Your kids will tell you if you're too fast or if you're too slow. You don't want to be the rocket starter. You don't want to be afraid of the swimmers and step them up and it's take your mark, beep, take your mark, beep, take your mark, beep, because then the swimmers will jump. They will know that you're going to set them off the minute you say take your mark, and they're going to get to a meet where the starter is more patient, more practiced, and that swimmer is going to learn take your mark, jump, and they're going to be disqualified. So learn some patience. Learn to let the kids come down. Learn to let them find their mark before you send them out. It's your eyes. Your eyes have to travel up and down that line of swimmers. You have to see that everyone has found your mark. Sometimes you may have a swimmer that chooses not to go all the way down. They call it a dangling arm start. If that's their choice, that's fine. You would see them like this. They will not go all the way down. That is their mark. So you need to learn to watch for everybody's position, to be found, and to be stationary. Watch videos, watch everything you can, and come to meets and ask questions. If you need help, come and ask a more experienced official to help you. Everyone is more than willing to help you.
Okay. So we want to just remind you all that these swimmers work really, really hard every single day, and they deserve to have the best possible meet that you can provide for them. You must study your rule book, go to your meet, be approachable. These kids have tons of questions. You can't be on deck and be a Gestapo. You've got to be able to be approachable so that they feel they can come to you and get their questions answered. They deserve to have a wonderful swim meet, and that's only with your help can they do that. So be there with a smile on your face and apply the rules where applicable and make sure these kids can have the best meet possible. Thank you and good luck.